Hi, and welcome to another episode of Mark's Motivational Podcast. It's great to be back again, another Authors Tuesday. So today I'm delighted to be joined by another great author. She's really looking forward to talking to her. She's a PhD in psychology, and she was a former teacher as well. And she's got biblical books out there as well. So I'm looking forward to Terry sharing all about her books that she's written. So you're very welcome along to the podcast today, Terry. Thanks a lot for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, it's great. So, just to start off, we would like to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, and the books you've written would be great. Great start. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, as you mentioned, I had been a teacher before. I actually was a teacher at the university level too, and I was in administration as a dean. And around 2016, 2014, 15, and 16, things really started changing in education. And I thought, maybe it was time to retire and do something else. I had always written in academia. We have to write. It's all research-based. But once I retired, I decided to write something that was more fun and more meaningful to me. The research is always meaningful, especially for parents and children who have disabilities. I enjoyed doing that. But now I was ready to start on a new adventure of writing something that could teach, but also entertain. And I was a little bit disturbed by what I started seeing back then, and we're seeing even more of it now. And that is the kind of a weakening of our education curriculum system here. And I know you see the news from, across the pond. You see what's going on here with the exposure of kids to maybe reading materials and curriculum that not all parents agree with. So, and I know, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, in Dublin, your school system is different. And just from what I could read, because I haven't experienced it, it looks like you've got a little more wiggle room for some of the faith-based information there. Parents can still opt out of that, but that it's still offered. And here it's just not allowed to be offered. And even in the public libraries, and that's kind of where a lot of my writing began after I retired, I started talking to some librarians and asking them about these issues because I was quite concerned. And I even heard from another librarian this morning who said the very same thing I heard back in 2016. And that was that the books that we might think of as wholesome and maybe a little more faith-based for kids is not allowed in the libraries. In fact, I've had more than one librarian tell me they have to, if it looks like it's a Christian or faith-based book, they have to either put it in their office and only bring it out, or take a kid in there to, offer this as an option, or they're not allowed to spend money on these books to order them in certain libraries because their administrators won't allow it. And so a lot of the books that we maybe thought were pretty wholesome, books growing up, they're not showing those to kids anymore. And that was quite disturbing to me, because I still think there's a lot that Christian authors can offer to kids to teach them about the world and history, And so one of the first series that I started writing that was published by a publisher, because I do self-publish and have publishers also, was something called the Newton Chronicles. And that one is, this is what this one looks like. And there's 3 books in it. It's won awards also.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all my writing starts out with a question or a problem. And so the Newton Chronicles began because I'm concerned that kids, and this was before we have what's going on now in the Middle East, because this was in 2018, 2019 when I wrote this series, that kids understand why we're concerned about Israel and Jerusalem. Why is it important in today's world? Because I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I always thought religious wars. Who would fight over that? I thought,
Yeah.
nobody's going to fight over that. And then here we are there. That's what's happening. So the Newton Chronicles series is an effort for kids as young as 7, 8 years of age, because it's a young reader's book, to see the importance of that area of our world. And the way the series starts, it's 3 kids who are I've described them almost as 3 knuckleheads, because they're fun kids. They do a lot of silly, fun things that kids at that age of 12 do.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it's for 8-year-olds, you always write up, you have a little bit older characters, so the younger kids think they're cool.
Yeah.
So this is, I said, around 7, 8 years of age for interest level in reading. And one of the kids' father has disappeared. In fact, he'd been gone for 2 years and was presumed to be dead. But his father was an archaeologist at a university, and he was on a dig in Jerusalem when he disappeared. And so this character was convinced his dad was still over there, but didn't know what happened to him. Nobody could find him. And then he and his 2 good friends, he has one friend that's a preacher's son who knows everything about the Bible. And he has another friend who's a girl, and she's a Messianic Jew. And she knows she's multilingual. She's got all these languages, and she can speak Aramaic and Hebrew, so you got to have somebody like that if you're going over there to help these kids out. So here we have a preacher's son, and then we have Luke, the main character, whose dad was the archaeologist, and the daughter, who is a Messianic Jewish girl who is a neighbor. And so they find this quantum physics device that they set off and cannot control it. And it's a time travel adventure. So they're hopping all back and forth between the New Testament. They go back to, the 6-Day War. They go back to World War II. They're hopping all over the place. And all of these places are to show the kids, throughout history, that has been the most important area in our world, especially for, Western countries, for those of us who are Christian. So that's the purpose of that, again, was to show kids why that area of the world is important, but to do it in a fun way. And of course, it takes them three books in the series before they actually locate the father. But that was a fun one to do. And as I said, all of my books kind of have a purpose, or, serve a purpose. And so another one that I wrote, this one's really special to me. This is the title doesn't sound very serious, but it really is. This is called Legends of the Donut Shop.
Good.
Now, I don't know if you can tell on the cover, looks like a young boy and then an old grandfather type leaning on a cane. Well, my dad and his buddies always met at the donut shop once or twice a week. They'd go up there and have coffee, and they were veterans of the Korean War, World War II. And I would go every time I was in town, and this was even until a couple of years ago. When I was in town, I would go with him and his buddies to the donut shop. And this was also when I was first publishing these Christian books. And one of the buddies said, Terry, the next book you write, you need to write it for kids about groups like this, so they'll see why we're up here. Because they come in, they grab a donut, and they just look at us like, look at those old guys. They don't know what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And so Legends of the Donut Shop, these old guys tell these stories about their past life. Now, the main character, which is the boy on the cover, is actually partially based on an experience that I had. He has a near-death experience where he is in the hospital and he's hovering up over his body, which he was from a car wreck. Now, I had that experience, but it was from a surgery. And so that happened 30 years ago, and it was a hard thing to talk about.
Yeah.
And I know now there's a movie called After Death that's out that talks about these near-death experiences, because it's like people thought you were crazy. You didn't talk about it, at least back then. No, you just didn't. And so it's kind of been a hard thing to write about, but I finally decided I was ready to do that. And so the story begins with this teenage boy who has a car wreck, and he sees himself kind of hovering over his body, and he's afraid he's dying. But then through that experience, while he's still in a coma, he goes back to his younger years when he goes to the donut shop with his grandfather. And so it's another little short time travel kind of thing where he goes back in time and he listens to the stories again, but now they mean something. And it's a book about second chances and, what you do when you face death seriously for the first time yourself and not just from a loved one. But the reason the story is so special to me is I was writing it because the old guys, they said, you got to go home and write this. And I said, okay. So that was in the fall. And I went home and I started working on it. And I was talking to my dad about it. I got the cover designer. She designed the cover. I sent it to Dad. He took it to his donut shop buddies. Oh, they loved it, So then it was at the editor for the last time. And then I was going to put it out. And my dad got COVID and my mom got COVID, and they both died within 24 hours. So they never got to see it. Although I know they've seen it now over my shoulder. I know they've seen it, but he never got to read it, even though it was written for him, he never got to read it. So I did give it to his buddies at their funerals because they were pallbearers. But in the book, there's veterans, there's a rancher who tells true stories based on stories from my son-in-law, who's a rancher. So there's, just like the Newton Chronicles, there's facts in the fiction. You have to have a really good foundation to have a really good story, especially if you want to teach something,
Yeah.
So in that one, they go back in history and hopefully give some younger kids. Although I've had a lot of grandparents that really like that book because they can relate to the old characters, even though it's a teenager kind of book.
That sounds brilliant. Really good.
Yeah,
Really
it was. It's really a special book to me, and if I feel like I'm missing them, I'll read it, and I feel like they're right there with me. It's just a really special book for me. And then another series that's actually 4 books are out. The 5th one is coming out December 5th. And this is called the Underground Book Reader series. I don't know if you've seen this or heard about this online, but this one is based on kind of what we were talking about earlier with the banning of books and so on, and what's happening kind of politically and in education. So after talking to those librarians, because I'd already been working on Newton Chronicles and Legends of the Donut Shop, but then I was talking more to librarians and their concern about, they've got some strange, I guess, different types of people in their own administrative structures, librarians do, and they are deciding in many cases where the money can be spent, and it's not going to be on faith-based books. Church schools maybe, but not public schools and not public libraries. That's becoming harder and harder to find, some good faith-based books, new ones that are publicly displayed. So with all of that going on, and kind of there's a lot now out on in the literature you might see of, end of times, and are we facing end of times? So this series is actually a little bit dystopian, but it's also action adventure. So it's a book where there's a group of teenagers, and this is, as I said, dystopian. It's begins in 2031, which is not too far in the future. But what has happened is the United States has been infiltrated and taken over. And it happened after a pandemic, which we just had. So they just called it this disease. They don't ever say it, it was COVID or anything in the book. It's just called the disease. But many of their parents died, or they were captured and taken in to serve in the military. And so you've got these teenagers and kids that are kind of living alone, trying to survive. They have a food ration station where they eventually meet each other, standing in line, waiting for their food. This happens in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia, in the caverns there. And I went and toured some caverns up there as I was writing the book. And these kids hide in the caverns and they find books and they hide them. They have a library in the cavern. They hide Bibles because those are forbidden. All the schools have been destroyed. The churches are all burned. There's no parents. And so they're surviving on their own. And throughout the series, what happens is they meet more and more kids and they are able to come up with some ways to learn. They learn to farm. They had one girl that had land there and she teaches them about farming. And so they're growing their own food and they're teaching themselves school. They find a few younger kids and they're teaching them how to read because the younger kids have never been to school. And then they're studying the Bible. And then as the series goes on, they meet some other interesting folks who've been hidden away, and they eventually decide they're going to escape the rule of this world force and set up their own world and, make it a better place. And so that's kind of where it is right now. Book 5 is coming out in December 5th. I had initially thought it would be 6 books in the series, but I'm not sure these kids are going to be able to solve all the problems in 6 books. So it might be 7 or 8, I don't know. But right now, that's where it is. So those are kind of the kids' books, that I've had out in the last couple of years.
They sound incredible. They sound really, really good. And like, as I said, congratulations. You've won a fair few awards in America for the Mom's Choice Awards. You mentioned your bio.
Uh-huh. Yeah, the Mom's Choice Award was for The Legends of the Donut Shop.
Okay.
Because the lesson in there that I didn't tell you is that the kid has a car wreck because there was somebody else who was texting and driving. So there's a little, I don't ever tell that to kids because I don't want it to come off like a lecture, but there's a little lesson in there. So yeah, that got the Mom's Choice Award, which I was pleased with that.
Yeah, no, it sounds brilliant. Because, and as you said, you have self-published some books and gone the traditional route. What's the preferred thing to do, Terry? When self-publish or the original?
Or have a publisher. I had to have traditional publishers for quite a while in academia, and big publishers. I've had small Christian publishers doing my Christian books. The advantage for me of doing the self-publishing is time. I just feel like there's so much more I want to write, and it's taking 2 to 3 years to bring a book out with a publisher, and I can have it out in 6 months once it's finished, like 4 to 6 months, depending on the editing and the cover design and all of that. So I'm not a spring chicken, and I want to get as many out as I can. And that's the biggest advantage, is having that control of the time factor. And I don't blame the publishers. I know they have small staff, and then we had delays from COVID, and then it's been kind of one thing after another with these different groups that have caused it to stop. The Newton Chronicles actually was put off about a year because of COVID. So that's that takes time.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and I loved the way your stories lead on to one another, like your books. Like you said, you thought you could have it done in 5, wasn't it? Or now you're looking at 6 or 7.
Yeah, and I have a lot of the readers that contact me, and I can't write them any faster. I'm trying to write. They're like, when is it coming out? And then one of them told me, she said, you cannot stop this at 6. She said, you got to have it 20 or 40 in this series. And I'm like, I don't know if I'll live long enough to write 40 books in this series, but that's a lot of books.
Yeah, no, it sounds absolutely brilliant, Terry. And where can people get your books? Are they available on Amazon? And
yeah, they're all available on Amazon. They're available on Amazon here and also UK. I don't know what your market is, but
UK, yeah.
They're available on Amazon UK as well. Barnes and Noble, you can order them through them. They don't usually have them on the shelves. I have them in some local small bookstores around Texas.
Yeah.
But mostly people order them online, or get them when I go to a book signing, that kind of thing.
Brilliant, yeah. No, I love the idea, like you're saying, about having them in small bookstores is like keeping it like nice to keep it offline as well to sell them in bookstores, isn't it?
Yes, I believe in the small, mom and pop kind of bookstores. I just
Yeah.
love those. I love to have book signings in those places. We've had, I think when you and I were talking earlier, I had just gotten over COVID again myself. I've had to cancel, like I've had COVID twice now, and I keep having to cancel these book signings, and
Yeah.
I miss that. I'm ready for COVID to go away so everybody can do what we always used to do. But it's been going around here again a second time, and
Same
I
here.
was, lucky to catch it again, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. But you're doing a lot better now, thankfully.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And as well as that, do you kind of when you're writing your books, do you have a kind of a strategy you use, Terry, when you're writing? Like, would you write a certain amount of words a day, or what's your strategy for
Oh
writing?
no, heavens no, I can't do anything that predictable.
Like, yeah.
I write in very long spurts, like 12 hours at a time.
Mm,
And then I may not write for a week.
mm,
But then I could write every day, 8 hours a day for 2 or 3 weeks. It depends on the story, kind of where I am with it. I'm a pantster, as they say. I don't plot. Um, I do. I can tell you, I'm one of those people that I'm so blessed. I get an idea at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's just given to me. I honestly feel like that's a gift. And if I get that, then I get up and that's when I write. And that could go on for days, when I have that inspiration well, I would say out of nowhere, but I know exactly where it comes from. I know where all gifts come from. So, that's, and I've tried that. Some people say, oh, you've got to write so many hours a day or so many words. And I just don't write that way. I could write easily 3,000 words a day without any trouble, without setting that as a goal if I'm writing. But then if we're traveling for a week, I don't write. I'm not one that writes every single day like a lot of writers do. I just think whatever works, as long as you're not just completely saying, I'm burnt out, I'm not writing anymore. Like you just put
yeah.
it away. As long as you know it's there and you're going to work on it. If you
Yeah.
got other things to do, you have to balance it out a little bit. Although my husband would probably say I don't balance it very well, because he's always saying you're still on the computer, But you try to.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. Thanks very much for sharing that. Like, because everybody has their own way
Mhm.
of doing it. Like some people have sports of time they write, and other times people are different. Yeah, so that's great. Thank you. No, because
Yeah, and I don't see how people write from an outline. I mean, I did that in academia when it was all, nonfiction. I could write from an outline, but I just don't, that doesn't work for me for fiction. And I know it works for a lot of people, but I just don't do it that way.
no, and you say for academia, like, have you written books for when when you're working in the school? Was it?
Yes, actually, the one that I had out, actually, the first time that got accepted for publication was 1989. First time it came out, I think, was 1991. And it's still out there. I just got finished with another revision of that. It's in the 9th edition, and that's on testing kids for special education, special needs kids. Assessment and special education was the title. And they kind of retitled it now, calling it inclusive education. That's the trend is all going that way. But and I had a co-author for the last edition of it, because I just feel like I'm spending more time on fiction than I am academic work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, and of course a lot of research papers. I'd written chapters in other people's textbooks, that kind of thing. But it's a different kind of writing, and I'm kind of glad not to be doing it anymore.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great, because No, and can people get that book as well? Can people?
Oh yeah, it's just
Yeah,
everything is on my Amazon page if they
great,
go to Terry Overton.
great.
And then
Yeah.
I have a web page also that's author terryoverton.com, and that's a web page that's got all of these books we've been talking about.
Mm,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, because I can share all your links on the show notes for people to check out as well.
Hmm.
So like if you send me on what you have there, and I can put it up
Oh,
on the
sure,
podcast show
sure.
notes, it'd be great.
Yeah, I also have a blog, and I'll send you the link to that.
Brilliant.
And
Yeah.
then I do send out a newsletter, but I promise I'm not one that sends it out every week and clutters up your mailbox. I usually just send it out if I have something, to coming out. So it might be once a month or every 2 weeks for, a few newsletters, and then I won't write it again for another month. So
Yeah.
I'll send you the information about that.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thanks very much. Yeah.
Mhm.
No. And as well as that, what's your favorite kind of books to read as well, Terry? What's your favorite? Well, not a favorite author as such, but like one that comes to mind that
Mhm.
you like to read.
That's a hard question. I read so much now as
Yeah.
research for this. So a lot of what I'm reading is biblical, biblical research,
Hmm.
other, Christian authors. Um, that's kind of where I'm reading, and I don't have a lot of spare time right now to read just plain old fun books. Although I like the fiction, like the Left Behind series, and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
They're fun to read too. So.
Yeah. Because I love the way you're putting science fiction in your books as well as giving a
Mhm.
lesson to children that comes from across to me like it's really good. Like I'm looking forward to getting that book for my daughter as well, the one you're saying about the donut shop. It
Oh
just
yeah.
sounds really, really good.
Yeah. How old is she?
She's nearly 14. So
Oh yeah, that's perfect. And
yeah.
the underground book readers, she might be interested in that. It's dystopian, like I said, but it's,
Mm.
it happens in the United States. So I don't know how interesting that would be to her
Oh,
because it
no.
happens over here.
Yeah.
But I mean, in the book, it's happening across the world, but the
Hmm.
story is focused on this country. So
Yeah, yeah. No, no, thanks very much for sharing it. As well as that, do you have any favorite what's your favorite movies to watch? Do you have a favorite movie or favorite type of movies?
oh, this is really a very good question. And this honestly goes with whatever I'm working on. So
Okay.
if I'm writing a Christmas book, I am watching Christmas movies. If I
Yeah.
am writing, the underground book readers, I'm going to be watching something dystopian.
Hmm.
Um, if I'm writing something like the Newton Chronicles, I might be watching the series The Chosen. It's just
Hmm.
like whatever I'm in the mood for, that's what I'm going to watch.
Yeah, great stuff. And do you find as well, when you're writing, the characters kind of take they come alive nearly on the page. Do you
Oh,
find that?
absolutely. In my head.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
that's when I was talking about waking up at 3 a.m. It's
Yeah,
because they're usually having an episode or a conversation or something,
yeah,
I
yeah.
get tickled sometimes authors say, my characters won't behave. I'm like, I know what you mean. It's like, what you want the character to do, but you got to get them there, and that sometimes is a little bit harder.
Yeah, yeah. And I can see you've got a great grandchild now. I just saw your
Yes,
yeah. Is that
yes.
recent?
Uh, yes,
Oh yeah,
yes. A little over a
congratulations.
year ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
congratulations.
you. Yeah.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have, I'm quite concerned about the world events and what's going on. I have a grandson who is in the Army in a unstable area. And actually I have a grandson and his really good friend. They're both in a pretty unstable area right now. So, anybody has extra prayers to
Yeah.
want to, share for my kids, I would appreciate it. My other kids, they're all over the place. I've got granddaughters that are, going to school in Oklahoma, and they're just all spread out. And I'm still down here in Texas, but
Yeah. Oh, spread out.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
they're all over the place.
Mm. But yeah, like I was gonna like, is there one thing you could say to people as an author yourself to kind of give them advice of how to keep themselves motivated in their writing? What would you say, Terry?
Well, I don't know if it would apply to all authors, but I am always, I've been what they call in academia a lifelong learner. I'm always wanting to learn more about what I'm writing about. And I know some people maybe who have, all these degrees just in writing and creative writing, and they do a lot of, just pure fiction that's not necessarily based on facts. But to motivate, for me to be motivated, I'm going to learn something and then about something I'm interested in, and then figure out how that fits into my characters that are already telling me what they're going to do,
Yeah.
So for me, it's doing the research, really researching what it is that you're going to put in your story. I think that's important.
Definitely, yeah. No, that's great. That makes so much sense. Thanks a lot for that, Terry. And your favorite music as well. Do you have favorite music you like to listen to yourself?
That goes along with what I'm writing also.
Okay,
I have an adult book series that's based on this area here. I live right on the coast of Texas. And that series is called Sable Palms. And it's adults, but it's kind of the Golden Girls, that women my age that are living on the coast together, and they're funny. I like to write that series because they crack me up. Yeah. So if I'm working on something that's, like that, then I'll listen to beach music. I mean, it's just like the movies. It depends on what I'm working on,
Exactly.
I like to listen to even music based on the World War II era. If I'm writing something that had like the Underground Book Readers that has to do with, and I do watch a lot of war movies for that, because there's a lot of strategies, I want to think about militarily that might happen in a takeover like that. So then I might listen to that kind of music. And we listen to a lot of the music from the era when my husband and I were growing up, which is 60s and 70s, particularly a lot of what was called soul music or Carolina beach music. We like all the R&B classic stuff and the old rock and roll stuff. And of course, being in Texas, we listen to a lot of country music. So
yeah, brilliant.
yeah, we have a lot of that. When my dad passed away, he had, and this is my biological dad, he had a jukebox in his house. And for some reason, nobody wanted to mess with that jukebox. And then after I said, I'll take it, and had to pay the movers what you have to pay to move that big, ginormous jukebox, I figured out why nobody wanted it. But anyway, it's got a lot of his records. And he was, into jazz and old country, Western stuff, so we listen to all kinds of music at our house.
Great. And do you ever listen to music when you write as well? Just I asked, like, I've done that myself recently, not with lyrics, but just with a melody. Have you ever tried
I do that some, but what I tend to do more, we were talking about movies, and that if I'm in the mood to write, if I'm writing in a particular genre, I'll watch movies like that. I will watch a movie while I write, but it's always one I've seen, so I don't have to really pay attention to it. But I don't know why that's. Some people I know, they say they write with the TV on. I couldn't do that, but I can write if it's a movie that I've already seen.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. No, because sometimes people like kind of get a flow when you listen to music. When you're writing, like that's one thing that's helped me a bit.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I know a lot of other authors who talk about that. And I guess if I have listened to music, as I've said, it might be World War II era music. I just love that big band era, all those. I love any, Frank Sinatra, Artie Shaw. I mean, all that. I love all those, the Rat Pack. I like to listen to that stuff too. Yeah. And I have listened to that while I'm writing, or just playing jazz,
Great stuff. Yeah, because I can see you're a Ph.D. in psychology. How's that been working with your books? Have you used much of that when you're writing?
With the characters, maybe some.
Yeah.
Yeah, some. Yeah, I don't, I did use a lot of that background when I was teaching
Yeah.
and
Okay.
writing in academia,
Mm.
but I haven't pulled that much of it into the books, except maybe for character.
Very good. Yeah, that's great stuff. Yeah. No, it's great to have you on, Terry. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. And because myself personally, I don't watch the news anymore. I've kind of got to a stage. I used to watch the news all the time through COVID, and I've just stopped watching it. Like that's
Very depressing.
yeah. A lot of people are like that as well. They just seem to have switched off, saying if something's going to happen, we're going to know about it, but we don't need to watch it all the time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting thing too. Having gone through having a near-death experience, I'm perfectly secure whatever happens. I know how wonderful and peaceful I felt at that moment. And I know, if the world comes to an end around me, I know where I'm going to be. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I
Well,
do know people that watch news 24/7 and
mhm.
they're nervous wrecks,
Yeah.
from watching it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And what's that film you were talking about that's coming out soon about the near death
it's
experiences? Sorry.
After Death. Yeah, it's called After Death. And I believe the woman that I was watching an interview herself was a medical doctor, and she had an after death experience. Now hers was different than mine, but every time I have read, and I've read a lot of research on near death experiences too, and everyone seems to be different. There are a lot of, they kind of categorize them, the out of body experience of seeing yourself when you're above yourself is what I had. But she went further on hers, and actually seeing other people. But I think that she was probably kind of dead longer. Like mine was near death, but I think she actually died and came back. So I think there's different categories, for that. But I do want to see that film. It sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it does sound really interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it came out on the 27th, and I'm not sure yet. I think it was like a small streaming something, but I don't know where else, commercially, where else it might be available.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what's next for yourself, Terry? What's next for you?
Well, I'm still working on the Underground Book Readers series. I have one more book I've been working on for the Sable Palm series, which is the Texas women living on the coast. I've got one more of those.
Yeah.
But I have a couple of others in mind. Kids, books, and kind of dealing with the after death experience and dystopian kind of stuff. So
Great stuff. Yeah. And do you have a website that people can find you on as well?
yeah. The web page is the author Terry Overton, and it's Terry with a Y. So it's authorterryoverton.com is the
Right.
website.
Brilliant. And have you any book signings you'd like to mention for people that are listening and watching on YouTube for coming up soon?
Not right now. I was to have gone on one this week, a few hours away from here, but after I got COVID, and then my husband wasn't feeling well, so I just had to get out of that one. But that one's going to be coming up again in June, is what they told me, and that's in Central Texas, in a place called Seguin, Texas. Will be coming up in June. But as far as the small bookstores yet, I don't have any of those scheduled. There was another one of those I had to cancel because of COVID. So hopefully I'm immune now for a while, and I can do some book signings.
Yeah. No, I wish you all the best luck with everything you do. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to the podcast.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking with you too.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks everyone for tuning to today's podcast, Mark's Motivational Podcast. An absolute pleasure talking to Terry on the podcast today. So join us next time for another episode of Mark's Motivational Podcast. Thanks again, Terry.
Thank you.
Best of luck. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Mark here. Thank you for watching another episode of my Authors Tuesday podcast. I recently published a book of children's stories called The Adventures of Larry Lamppost and Friends. The book began life as bedtime stories I wrote for my own children. If you'd like to purchase my book, follow the link in the description box below. By buying my book, you are also supporting my podcast series for authors, which is giving a voice to writers in Ireland and across the world.